Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to
Dokumentarac Izraelizam govori o dvoje američkih Jevreja, Simone Zimmerman i Eitanu, koji su odgojeni da brane Izrael po svaku cijenu. Eitan se pridružuje izraelskoj vojsci, a Simone brani Izrael na akademskom ratištu, u američkim kampusima. No kada postanu svjedoci izraelskog ugnjetavanja palestinskih građana, shrvani su i užasnuti su. Pridružuju se pokretu mladih američkih Jevreja koji se bori protiv centralizacije Izraela u američkom judaizmu i zahtjeva slobodu palestinskog naroda. Njihova priča otkriva generacijske razlike i podjelu unutar američke jevrejske zajednice, kako sve više mladih Jevreja propituje narativ sinagoga i hebrejskih učitelja. Jedna od glavnih protagonistica filma, Simone Zimmerman, govori za Al Jazeeru Balkans o svom iskustvu izrealizma, načinu na koji je odgojena od vrtića do univerziteta, te trenutku kada počinje preispitivati sve do tada naučeno o Izraelu. Suosnivačica je i pokreta If Not Now, u prijevodu Ako ne sada, antiokupacijske grupe predvođene američkim Jevrejima. Dokumentarac Izraelizam proglašen je najrelevantijim filmom 2023. Mnogi američki kampusi pokušali su ga zabraniti jer govori o sve većem broju Jevreja koji se protive izraelskoj okupaciji i apartheidu u Palestini.
Some American Jews who come here say we came to Israel and we left from Palestine.
The non-Jewish community does not understand our obsession with Israel.
I went to a Jewish day school.
Summer camp, organized trips to Israel.
You want to go to Israel too? Yeah! We want to go! We want to go!
Israeli soldiers, they're hot, they're awesome, they're strong.
We actually have had quite a few of our former students join the IDF. These are kids, these are 18, 19-year-olds. Amazing.
I told my parents I don't even need to apply to college. I'm gonna just join the Israeli military.
10% of my graduating class joined the Israeli army.
We were deployed to the West Bank.
I don't think I realized the extent to which what I would come to see on the ground would really shock me and horrify me.
When people look at the West Bank today and say, this is an apartheid system, it's not just throwing out a word.
Palestinians live in, day out, without experiencing a day of freedom.
You see what non-democracy looks like.
What we've been told is that the only way that Jews can be safe is if Palestinians are not safe. The more I learned about that, the more I came to see that as a lie.
Within the Jewish community, there's been a striking change.
They're really angry at the way they were indoctrinated, justifiably so.
When we talk about we're losing the kids, we lost them. I think they're a little super naive.
Anytime you cut against the grain, you're going to catch hell.
You are a self-loathing Jew. Go kill yourself. An anti-Semitic Jew.
The way that we talk about anti-Semitism isn't about protecting Jews, it's about protecting Israel. How dangerous is that?
They will do anything to preserve unconditional support for Israel.
The great irony is that there actually is resurgent anti-Semitism.
Jews will not replace us!
History is not going to judge us kindly.
Simone, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So it's been a year now since the documentary Israelism was filmed, and it has become extremely relevant in light of the October 7th attack. What have the reactions to the film been since then?
Well, first of all, I should say that I am hearing right now from Jewish people around the United States and around the world who are so grateful that this film was made because it helps tell their stories, the stories of those of us who grew up with a more simplistic and idealistic narrative about the state of Israel and have come to face the Palestinian reality and understand the horrific oppression that is being committed against the Palestinian people in the name of Jewish safety, and are part of a growing movement of Jews who reject Israeli government policies and reject the way that the state of Israel uses us to justify what it's doing to the Palestinian people.
But still, some colleges and universities have actually gone as far as to ban the screening of the documentary. Why are academic institutions, the beacon of free speech and intellectual curiosity, taking such a rigid stance?
Yeah, well, I can say two things about that. The first thing is that, it's part of the foreign relations strategy of the Israeli government to claim that it's acting in the name of Jews around the world. And part of that relies on the perception that there's a consensus across our Jewish communities that supports the Israeli government's policies. That could not be farther from the truth. We see every day right now Jews around the world who are speaking out loudly and clearly against this government's genocidal assault on the Gaza Strip and saying, not in our names. And so part of why there's such an aggressive attempt to censor this film is because this film tells that story of this growing movement. It did not start on October 7th. There have always been Jewish people who have dissented against Zionism and against the policies of the state of Israel across history. This is not a new phenomenon, but it is something that is certainly growing with the younger generation of American Jews. So that's the first thing. They don't want this story of people like me. My story is not unique. It's part of a broad movement. They don't want that story told. And the second thing is that this cause has found a very unfortunate partnership with, authoritarian movements in the US and abroad who are seeking to attack universities specifically as these sites of critical learning and discussions about critical history and about the, uglier truths of many of our countries and societies, and attacking a project that seeks to bring those narratives to light fits very well within that agenda. I should also just say this was a film made by Jewish people about Jewish people, primarily in part for a Jewish audience. And so attacking the film and calling it anti-Semitic and saying that it makes Jewish students unsafe is completely absurd and reveals how cynical this strategy of conflating anti-Semitism and criticism of the Israeli government.
Yeah, the documentary is all about the process of learning. How hard was it for you to learn, but also unlearn things about Israel? What did the process look like for you? How did it start and how did it end?
It's been a very painful and meaningful process. I have to say it hasn't always been comfortable, but the reality of Israeli apartheid and occupation and siege, these are not comfortable realities. We should all be deeply uncomfortable knowing that such injustice is being committed against another people. And I feel deeply pained every single day knowing that these actions, that for some people, they're being justified in the name of some false notion of safety for me and my community. And so it feels deeply meaningful and urgent to me as a Jewish person to speak out against the injustice, and also to uncover and to learn more about the history that was, hidden from me in the upbringing that I had.
Young people and students like you across the U.S. Have organized sit-ins, and they have been very vocal when it comes to Gaza. They have called out Israel for its brutality against the Palestinians. They have called for a ceasefire, while the managements of these universities, including top universities such as Harvard, MIT, and Columbia, have been rather restrictive. Students have been arrested. Pro-Palestinian student unions have been dissolved. We have the case of the Professor David Miller from Bristol University, who has been dismissed for his anti-Zionist views. Why is this happening?
I think there's a very concerted effort to redefine anti-Semitism as criticism of the Israeli government. There's this initiative, this definition called the IHRA definition that basically seeks to redefine all strident criticisms of the Israeli government as anti-Semitism. And the people who are trying to advance this definition are mostly allied with the Israeli government and are seeking to use this as a tool for shutting down critical conversations, for actually making it illegal to speak out for Palestinian freedom. And they say that they're doing that all under the guise of fighting anti-Semitism. But it's very clear that these efforts have led to the empowerment of racist and authoritarian forces around the world and actually aren't helping keep Jews safe.
But Simone, do you feel safe? Do you have any regrets for speaking out?
What I want to say about this question about safety of American Jews and of Jews around the world is that I believe that we are endangered by this repeated conflation of all Jews with the state of Israel and the way that the Israeli government claims to be acting in the name of our safety, but also the way many governments around the world are saying that they are supporting the Israeli government's assault on the Gaza Strip in the name of protecting Jews. That endangers Jewish communities around the world who have, many of us have nothing to do with these policies and are very actively out in the streets protesting against them.
But why is criticizing Israel so controversial? Why is critique of Israel considered anti-Semitic when it is not? It's a democratic right to critique any government or a state.
Absolutely. Well, as you just said, you know, there are the state of Israel seeks to use this very real history of anti-Semitism, of, you know, oppression and persecution of Jewish people throughout history to justify its government's policies. Which actually right now are making Jews, including Israeli Jews, far less safe. So that's really important to keep in mind. And the other thing I would say is that we're seeing the way that the way that the Israeli government is claiming that criticism of the state is anti-Semitic is now helping fuel these broader assaults on free speech, on student protests, on these attacks on universities. I should also just say we haven't gotten to speak yet about, you know, in the US right now, the incredible rise in Islamophobia, in anti-Arab and anti-Muslim sentiment. And, you know, when we're talking about safety, I also feel it's very important to speak about the ways that there's been direct violence as well against Muslim American communities in the US as a result of the incredible Islamophobia and anti-Arab sentiment that has been fueled amidst this moment of crisis. You know, we just saw recently a Palestinian American was stabbed in Austin, Texas. This is after, you know, 3 Palestinian students were shot in Vermont and a young Palestinian American boy was stabbed in his home in Chicago. So there's been, and when we're talking about college campuses, you know, we see incredible harassment and doxing and even violence against pro-Palestinian student protesters. By the way, many of those protesters also include Jewish students. So when we're talking about safety, it's outrageous to me that we, you know, see public leaders kind of feigning concern for the Jewish community, but I have to ask over and over again, which Jews are you concerned about? Whose safety are you actually prioritizing? Because there's a lot of people who are being made much more unsafe in this moment, and I don't see our public leaders expressing concern for their safety and well-being.
It seems no one is safe because right-wing Israeli lawmakers are determined to silence Israeli Jews opposing the Gaza war. There's a case of Ofer Kassif in the Knesset. There are citizen protests in Tel Aviv and throughout Israel. There is a growing number of Israelis calling for a ceasefire, end of all violence, and release of hostages. But we also see them being arrested, intimidated, and silenced. How safe are leftists or anti-war voices in Israel that is being ruled right now by the far right?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked about that because the fascism within Israeli society is really scary. Palestinian citizens of Israel are being targeted, are being, you know, kicked out of universities, fired from jobs. They're feeling unsafe, literally unsafe in the streets. And Israeli leftists as well, you know, brave anti-war voices that you mentioned are facing similar persecution and repression. There's an intensely fascist environment there. There was even the story of a school teacher who was fired just for saying that, you know, there are mothers in Gaza and that there are human beings there. This is a very unsafe environment for Israelis to speak out right now, which is, again, why it's so important for those of us abroad to express our dissent. You know, I hear often from friends of mine within Israel that they see Jews who are protesting abroad strengthening them, articulating things that they feel unsafe to say in their own country right now.
But the rumor has it that Prime Minister Netanyahu will go soon.
I can't comment on that.
Okay. And how much damage have Netanyahu and his far-right government with Minister of Finance Bezalel Smotrich and the Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir done so far to Israel itself? The country has never been as polarized across the political spectrum and negatively perceived globally.
Absolutely. I mean, this is, the most extremist far-right government in Israeli history. They abandoned and failed their citizens on October 7th, and it seems every day they are just, continuing to abandon the safety and well-being of their citizens in favor of this absolutely catastrophic and horrifying war of revenge and death, this mass campaign of death and destruction on the Gaza Strip that is so clearly not about keeping Israelis safer, but about, decimating the Palestinian people and inflaming tensions in the region. And I feel terrified every day for Israelis and Palestinians under whose lives are just being destroyed by this reckless, hateful, authoritarian government.
But in your opinion, what is the final goal of this government?
Many of the leaders of this government have made very clear that they are outright opposed to a Palestinian state and that their goal is death and destruction in the Gaza Strip. And I think more leaders should be listening to them and taking them at their word.
Do you think that, has Israel reached the point of no return when it comes to its global standing? Because public opinion polls published by Time magazine, carried out by the company Morning Consult, show that support for Israel has dropped globally by an average of 18.5 percentage points between September and December, decreasing in 42 out of 43 countries polled. What do you make of that?
I think that it's very hopeful that there's this case in the International Court of Justice right now. And I hope that this is the beginning of a time of accountability for Israeli human rights violations and for crimes against the Palestinian people that have been, ignored and allowed to continue for far too long.
And this also affects Jewish community in the US, as you said, and worldwide. We already have rising anti-Semitism along with Islamophobia that you mentioned. So what needs to be done to reduce hatred and the polarization and to stop the vicious circle of violence that actually has its roots in structural violence in the case of Palestine?
Yeah, well, polling regularly shows that younger American Jews, support a ceasefire. That's the basic first step that we need to see happen urgently. Young people are very angry about the way that the administration has allowed this government to act so recklessly. And, more than that, we need to see an end to the occupation and to apartheid and to the siege. And these are the baseline first steps to ensuring a future of freedom and dignity and safety and well-being for all Palestinians and Israelis.
How possible is to reach these baselines, as you said?
In this time of such tremendous grief and devastation, I don't feel that I can make predictions about how possible things are, but I believe that, as an activist, as a person of conscience, I have to advocate for that better future. And we see this growing public support for an end to this war and for public support for the movement for Palestinian freedom. And I hope we'll continue to see it grow and that will hopefully lead to a better future for all people living in that land.
What are your hopes and expectations as a young Jewish anti-Zionist person?
I would hope that more and more people in my community will speak out and call for an end to the war and to a genuine, just future for all people in that land. And we'll support accountability for the Israeli government for its crimes, and hopefully see more and more of us, fighting back against these movements, these racist authoritarian movements that target all of us and make us less safe, and understanding the way that, the Israeli government is a partner in those growing movements and does not actually have our safety and well-being as Jewish people at heart.
Simone, thank you for your time and for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you so much.